My name is Steve Orr. Let us welcome you. I will welcome you, and then my colleagues will help me welcome you to our continuing webinar series, addressing a series of topical issues that we think are highly relevant to all of us, particularly the nonprofit industry. And today we really want to focus in on two particular issues that I think we all are both challenged by and in this current environment and hopefully excelling in, and that is leadership and sort of new techniques and approaches and timing to fundraising. So leadership and fundraising are the two big topics we want to address. I thought I would just start with a quick update as to where it seems like we are, because we did a webinar, the last webinar we did was a week ago, and a lot has changed for sure. First of all, the great news, of course, is that the virus curve seems to be, plateauing and possibly moving down, which is great. Time will only tell, and you have to be really cautious, I think, when you say that, but all indications, it seems, from the experts are that that's happening, so that's good news. And actually, that does help frame some of the things we want to talk about today. There's now a heavy-duty focus, as everyone knows, on the economic calamity and all the steps being taken on monetary and fiscal policy to try to remedy and loosen up the system and get back into full gear. It will take time, for sure. But things like the stock market are doing well, or better, let's say. So that's good news. We'll see how fast we can move back in that direction. The PPP program, last webinar we spent a lot of time because it had just come out. There have been a gazillion conversations and hopefully a lot of action in the last week. I know we've helped coach several of our partners through the PPP application with their bank. Things keep changing on that front, of course, as you might expect they would. They put this program together very quickly, but it does appear that it might have, the impact that it's intended to. So that's good. I think that will help. They're talking about another $250 billion of additional small business assistance through that program. So that could be very beneficial as well. So let's be hopeful on that it all works as they are suggesting it will. We also, last webinar, and I feel very strongly, have recommended that donor communication really significantly increase. And I would indeed say that in the last week, it's gone into hyper mode, which is good. People want to talk. People have a lot to say. People have a lot of feelings. And, in our communities, we are, sort of the front line on helping people and addressing feelings and issues. And I think this being one of the biggest of the day, the big issue of the day, talking about it is probably the best, has been the best approach. We're going to talk about what we think today might be some, suggested next steps in both communication and activity around fundraising and the nonprofit community. So there certainly have been major changes in the way that our work routines are rolling out. I think a lot of good things have happened. Shabby's going to, in particular, focus in on some of the things she observes. I think it's pretty exciting, and maybe we're going to learn from this. And then on the healthcare change, I was just watching a seminar with two of the leaders down in DC, who are the CEOs of MedStar and Inova. And they were commenting how the physical, seeing a physician or a doctor has plummeted and e-visits have skyrocketed. Now that's an interesting thing that you might expect in an environment like this, but maybe that's an indicator of the way things are going to go in the healthcare business. I think likewise, the reason I bring that up is because likewise, we are probably seeing trends develop in our own business with nonprofit organizations that may indeed be enduring, and I think we should learn from it, and I think we should talk about it, and that's really gets us into the content today of where we want to go. What is coming next? How we already adapted, and will it continue? And how do we adapt moving forward? Those, I think, are really critical issues on the table. Surely, as we've learned from past crises, we draw on experience and learn from what happened in those past ones. And I think many of us are trying to apply that, to the current situation. But I think we all talked, before this webinar and said, this really is a moment. If indeed this thing is peaked, if we're starting to feel more optimistic in terms of the economy, and if our businesses are starting to play more normally, back to business kind of thing, then this is indeed a moment. And we should really think about that, as to what we learned and then how we can apply that moving forward. So a couple of housekeeping things. We want to keep this as much of a free-flowing discussion as possible. So I'll introduce my colleagues in one sec. But we'll just, we'll go into sort of a series of question and answers around issues we think that you're interested in. Please use the Q&A function because we'll be watching that as we go through, and we'll try to address questions that you might want to pose to us as we're talking. So we'll try to keep this very interactive and topical. So let me introduce Shabby Rosales. She's been with Orr Group for 4 years. She's vice president. Now, Shabby is interesting. She has several roles. She heads up our internal HR, which has been, very vibrant and active in the last 3 weeks in particular, but always is. And then she also provides an outsourced HR function. So anyone who wants to tap into her enormous skills has the opportunity to do so. And she's currently running the HR departments and other nonprofits. And then she also runs recruiting. So lots of business activity there and lots of interesting stuff. Craig Shelley has been with us for 7 years. He's a managing director. He came to us from as the CDO of Boy Scouts. Brings a lot of leadership experience, hands-on fundraising experience. He currently manages many of our key relationships in a lot of places: New York City, San Francisco, Boston, Long Island. He is the jack of all trades, and we're delighted to have him here. So these are a couple of our most senior folks at Orr Group. So we should have a vibrant and interesting discussion. So let's get into it. The first category is leadership. And, there's so many issues that come up in leadership. I always like to put myself out there because I am the CEO of this company. And I know that the way I act and the demeanor I have and the way I communicate many times sets the tone for our own company and our own initiatives and where we want to go with our partners, clients. And so I'm, as conscious as I can be, and I would suggest that, anyone who's in a leadership position, and we are all in leadership positions, that we act, in a way where we're proud of what we're saying and that we're, leading by example. So I think those are really important things to keep track of. Obviously, number one issue for us all is still health. This is not over. We are concerned about staff. We are concerned about our partners. We're concerned about our family. And that is appropriate and needs to be, front of mind at all times. And I think it is. I am very delighted, I will say it, and proud of Orr Group. We have not experienced, any virus contraction within our family of staff. So I think we took the right actions by, staying at home starting, 3 weeks ago, Shabby, I think. Yep, so that worked. Congratulations there, and we're very, very happy about that. And I hope that is the same for you in your setting. So one last issue generally, I find in all these discussions that we are having every day and every hour, some people in our, who we speak with in leadership positions are very cautious and still very hunkered down. I think that's a kind of a natural tendency in our industry, the nonprofit industry. We're always thinking about people and caring for people and addressing tough issues like the virus type of issue. And that, tends to convey to a donor, if we get to that level, one way of communicating. The other way to communicate, and I might think that, given that this is a moment that we really think carefully about this, those of us who are in leadership positions, is that we really become positive and optimistic, and we are looking forward now as opposed to, hunkered down in the past. That's not to say the danger is past. That's not to say I'm being naive. It's just to say that we have a responsibility to keep moving and keep going. And so I am very positive. I am very optimistic, and I want to convey that to you, and I want to convey that in every conversation I have. So having said that, Shabby, let's start with you. You are, we talk at Orr Group about culture all the time, and it's not new. It's not just because of this crisis. It is one of our primary tenets. We think it's why people come and work with us and why they stay and why they enjoy this workplace. And for us, that means heavy team focus, collaboration, and then the element of being nimble and quick, entrepreneurial. I come from an entrepreneurial background. A lot of other people do here at our company. And that's really, really important to us. And we want to bring that in all of our conversations and our work to, our partners out there. So, this period's been very challenging. And so on culture, how have you held this together for us and for the other organizations you're working with? And what are your thoughts about culture?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think from a technical standpoint, we, from our team, have adapted really well to remote work. I think just traditionally in the work that we do, working either remotely or from different satellite locations anyway, we've used Zoom, I think, long before this crisis erupted. So keeping that sort of connectivity and open lines of communication have always been a steadfast part of our culture. And I think that's helped with what we've seen at some of our nonprofit partners as well. They've been much quicker to adapt, I think, to technology than they probably would have been in the past, which has been really good. But things have changed for us, including being more fluid and flexible with our meeting frequency and cadence. We introduced additional meeting sessions so that we come together every single day. We don't limit the topics to work-related announcements. It's actually evolved into like this free-flowing conversation, and it ranges from uplifting to enlightening. So it's actually been really nice, increasing the frequency that we see each other and get to talk to one another.
Jabby, do you also see that happening at the organizations that you're providing outsourced HR for?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of them are moving to daily meetings, if not weekly, they're moving to daily meetings at a minimum. And we've also seen an increase in one-on-one touch bases, right? So folks are trying to maintain connectivity. Whatever would have brought them together before is still happening, albeit virtually.
So the technology has obviously been a really important component. And as you well know, we've been using Zoom for, I don't know, at least a couple of years. And we try to bring that into the workplace, into our partner situations every time we can. What's your observation about where the nonprofit industry is in tech, and how have we adapted in the last 3 weeks?
Yeah, it's really been interesting. I think, like, typically we've always found that the NPO industry has been slow to change and move into technological advancements, things like this. Especially whenever we go into a new place, it feels like we're always the one introducing Zoom or video conferencing or whatever. But over the last 3 weeks, folks have been forced to be thrust into this environment where now it is just part of the working world. You have to still maintain that connectivity. You have to be able to see who you're talking to. And our laptops are all equipped with cameras. We can buy cameras very inexpensively. We can work on FaceTime on our phones if we need to. So there's all sorts of technology that's available and around us, many of it for free or already available that we don't need to invest any additional dollars in. And so we found that folks have really risen to the challenge of needing to adapt to this very quickly.
So Shabby, as we look forward, how is this going to change our behavior? And how is it going to change our productivity? And, is the nonprofit industry and the leadership changed forever, or was this just a flash in the pan and we're going to go back to what we did?
I think our industry, much like the nation and the world writ large, will be permanently changed coming out of this shared experience, right? By force majeure, I think I already said, we've been thrust into being more nimble, more flexible, more accommodating. We're required to multitask and prioritize like never before. I mean, you have folks that have to work and provide childcare and be teachers and all of these things that they haven't had to do before. They have not had to juggle quite as much as they are right at this moment. And I'd argue we can actually leverage that by being more open and creative going forward with everything that we do, that bring this same amount of vigor into the workplace when we come out of this on the other side.
So Craig, moving over to you, you do come to us with a lot of leadership experience. You've now been at our firm for quite a while, providing, top line thought leadership, as well as giving great advice, lots of clients and such. When you look, historically at the last couple of disasters or, crises, and then you think about what's going on right now, from a pure leadership point of view, what are the most important attributes for leaders?
Yeah, I mean, and I've been thinking a lot about the point of like what's sort of changed forever, but also trying to think back of like, all right, we've done other things, I've had other experiences that have been traumatic or, you know, certainly crisis type things. But I think to me, the biggest thing that I've been noticing lately of sort of the difference between people that are going to thrive in this environment and the people that, you know, will likely survive or maybe not survive. A lot of it is speed in which they make decisions, right? Like, so the organizations that tend to be very bureaucratic and slow, I think they're struggling right now because right now we're in an environment where you need to decide very quickly what you're going to do. And you need to be culturally very comfortable with, I might be wrong. You know, somebody that's been a mentor and a friend to me for a long time, I heard say to their bosses recently, you know, we're probably making 75% of these decisions wrong, but that's okay because not making them at all is going to be far worse. So you have to kind of go quickly. And if you're equipped to do that, you'll be better served. But at the same time, I would caution that doesn't excuse you from thinking about the long term, right? And it doesn't excuse you from making a decision that will negatively impact your strategy or your organization or your mission longer term. So what I'm saying is like you have to decide quickly, but you have to implement very deliberately, right? So like say you decided, you know, you needed to do a reduction in force for whatever reason, you know, that's where you are. How you do that and who you do that with, then slow down and take the time to do that right, because those people now are gone permanently. The impact you've had on your organization is permanent. You know, selfishly, same type of thing. It might be easy to say, let's cut investment in fundraising. Well, but long term, is that really, you know, going to benefit my organization? So you have to really think about the long term benefits once you make decisions quickly. And then I think culturally, you need to be comfortable. Again, this idea you're going to be wrong. But if you're in a culture that has sort of like that gotcha culture, which we've all worked in, where it's like, oh, if you're wrong, you're kind of like got the scarlet letter on you. That's not going to work. Like we have to be sort of in an environment where like, okay, well, that's going to work. Let's go on to the next thing. And, you know, we're not going to hold grudges about that.
So Craig, one of the dynamics that we all deal with in nonprofit industry is that we have a board of directors that we report to, and also that provide hopefully positive leadership direction and such. In an environment like this, has it been your experience that boards are critical and helpful, or are they tend to be more naive and, you know, getting in the way?
I've seen both. I got to be honest, and the truth lies in like how you've communicated and worked with your board prior, right? Like if you've had the sort of right relationship where they're strategically you're very aligned, and they understand when they want to help and when you need them to sort of step back, that's worked great. But if you're in these environments where there's probably if there's a lack of trust between the board and the leadership, now these types of crisis, like it just blows up, because now if I don't trust you and you have to make decisions on the fly, you know, every hour seemingly, that's going to grind the whole thing to a halt, because then the board's going to have to get involved in decisions on a more micro level. And you can't do that quickly. So I think when the relationship and the balance is correct, once the board is sort of bought into the overall vision, setting the strategy is extremely helpful in terms of external relationships, whether that's fundraising or other, and is bringing to bear their expertise of like, hey, I'm a PR expert, or I'm a accounting expert, or you need help applying for the PPP, and this is what I do for a living, you know, whatever that may be. That's really great. When they try and get into the day-to-day, it just isn't going to work right now, probably more than ever before, because you have to be moving quickly. But so I guess I've seen both, and the preference is the ones that are playing the role that a board's supposed to play.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely right. So the advice, if we have board members who are listening in today, would be use your expertise if you have it, as you said, because the organization in those certain areas, you know, of critical importance that right now could really use your help, communication and probably the financial decisions, that type of thing. But, you know, don't get overly involved, right? Don't become a nuisance, because that can happen. And, you know, you hired your executive director and your key staff leadership to perform the function of leading. Let them lead. Because you're right. I think you also said something really smart, that we're all going to make mistakes. I hope it's not 75% of the time, but, you know, we're all going to make mistakes. But that's what we get paid to, you know, we don't get paid to make mistakes, but we get paid to make decisions. And these are uncertain times, and it's pretty tough. I mean, every day new issues are coming up. So good comments. So Shabby, back to, you know, HR and sort of the talent management piece. You do work with a number of organizations simultaneously. So, you know, what do you think of your role and the role of your peers, in other organizations during this particular moment of crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's natural for HR. Your HR team is going to find themselves at the forefront of any crisis, and not just because we're sort of naturally adept under pressure, though that certainly does play a part. But I think it's because so much of our day-to-day revolves around needing to make tough decisions in very short order and with like very limiting constraints. And I think that is the same sort of environment that you find yourself in when in a crisis. And to Craig's point of we are probably going to make a lot of mistakes. That's because we don't have all of the information, and we probably are not going to have it until long after this is over. And so you need to be comfortable in being able to make swift decisions without all of the information. And because you're doing that, you're bound to make mistakes, but that's okay. You need to just be able to have it all be organized in such a semblance of a way that when you come out of it on the other side, you're not completely just torn apart, right? I feel like that really correlates to how leaders are finding themselves right now at this very moment amid this crisis, which is evolving every single day. Many of us have been through crises before. I think on prior calls we've mentioned like 9/11, the 2008 recession, et cetera. But this is unlike that in so many ways because it's continuing to evolve, and yet there's so much that's still left unknown. So relying on those attributes of being decisive, being quick thinking, being flexible, and being creative, I think will help carry through in the toughest times.
And what's an interesting topic is one of recruitment.
Yeah.
when we think that this is probably a time where we're going to see changes. If people have been laid off, they might be rehired, they might not. People are probably spending a lot of time right now thinking about their careers and about, do I enjoy what I'm doing? Is this the time to make a change? That type of thing. And then if you're the executive director or in a leadership position at a nonprofit, this is a perfect moment to think about, well, where am I in this departmental design or this organizational design? And is this a time, when I should be dynamic and be thinking, okay, let's launch a search for that position we've never filled or whatever the situation might be. So because you're in the recruitment business, do you see this as an opportunistic time, to do that? Or is it just, wait a minute, it's way too early, we have to wait?
No, I mean, I think that there is a way to be strategic about it. I realize at this very moment with so much unknown, people are sort of wary of wanting any additional expense or anything added to the bottom line than they already need. But it takes time to recruit. It takes time to suss out and figure out who is going to be the best fit for your organization. And so I would not recommend that anybody wait until they are fully, back to work before they start recruiting. Start recruiting now, right? We're seeing an unprecedented number of displaced workers on account of cost-cutting measures that are happening all over the place. So there's going to be a groundswell of skilled labor in the market coming out of this. So in anticipation of that, sort of to your point, right now is the time to be thinking about the team and what skills and what functions are going to be critical going forward. It might look different. The new normal might look different than what you have right now. So if you had a slate of event planners, that might be different. Maybe you need to bring people on that can do stewardship or can do, digital fundraising or something like that. You might need more people with a tech background. You might need people that are better at strategy or something else, or better at moves management, or better just at ticking the boxes of what needs to happen in fundraising generally. So, I think there are a couple things to consider. One is to consider which roles can be consolidated and which can be handled remotely. So this is a conversation we were having just internally a little while ago, which is, we have for so long been thinking that we've been constrained by thinking that our people need to be centrally located to each office that we have, each physical office. But this sort of environment that we found ourselves in right now proves that we can actually do our work all completely remotely from anywhere on the planet or anywhere in the country. And so it really opened our eyes to thinking differently about the types of hiring that we're going to do going forward. And I would argue that that would work for any organization if you just think really critically and strategically about which roles can be handled remotely, because that'll open up your pool of available candidates. And the other thing, like I said about the event example, is think about considering transferable skills, because like traditional fundraising events may have come to a halt. Planners and producers and people that have that background can help the frontline team with curated stewardship. They can help with cultivation activities, digital events. That's so cute. But all kinds of
What are the joys of being at home?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But no, but they can help with all
Okay.
kinds of things. So I think now is the time to get creative and to be strategic. To Craig's point, these are, permanent decisions that are going to have long lasting impact. And so if you're cutting now, or if you are thinking about putting your recruiting or hiring on hold, now is the time to be very critical in that thinking and think through what exactly am I going to need long term, and what does the future of our organization look like.
So we're getting some really good questions. So I'm going to jump in and out of some of these questions. One question comes around, Craig, probably best for you, this virtuality that we're in terms of board meetings. Do boards become less, directly associated with and responsible for the mission, or have people adjusted in such a way where that, it's no different for the board?
Yeah. And I think the answer is 6 weeks ago, yes, they became less committed and connected if the whole phone meeting was virtual or, by phone. I think that's totally different now because they're conducting so much of their lives now like this, that all of us are better at it, right? All of us are more accustomed to it. All of it are more comfortable. I joke, I don't even think I could talk to my wife without I feel like she should get on Zoom because all I do is talk to people. So yeah, I think that's not a concern anymore the way it was previously. Now, the long-term question is, do we go back to our old habits or do we stay like this?
Right.
And my guess is, we'll obviously see people in person, but we're going to continue to be comfortable communicating more and more like this. And that's to Shabby's point of we can hire people wider. It opens up a board recruitment sort of opportunity. If all your board meetings were in Manhattan, you normally recruited all board members that were in Manhattan. Now, if your board members, people are going to be more virtual, who knows? Maybe there's a really great person in Milwaukee that has something to contribute to your organization that you just never recruited because they never come to the meetings. Well, I don't know. So I think there's some parallels there.
That's
to
interesting
board
because
and staff.
whether it's staffing or recruiting board members or whatever, attracting talent to your organization, this whole idea of dealing more virtually could have an enormous impact on us for all the reasons you're talking about now. It is so hard. We, as a company, Shabby, you've been running it, have been looking for high quality fundraising folks in New York City in particular, and at a senior level. And it's very, very, very challenging to find and secure the right people. Understanding that it has to be great for them, it has to be great for us. But if this opens up, it doesn't really matter where someone is because the Zoom is going to be just as effective. That's a huge plus, and it's probably going to say, be more efficient because on the margin we can hire people, at lesser cost and those type of things. So I think there are potentially long range issues, and that circles back to recruitment. That maybe that opens up, a whole new line of opportunity around recruitment. There's also a good question here on Craig. I'll go back to you again. Is there a situation where the board has too much trust in the CEO? Because we're both talking about, leave it to the CEO and the senior staff and let them make decisions and such. But good question. At what point is there too much trust for the CEO?
Yeah, and I think that is a balance. And I think we've all seen it, right? Sort of the CEO becomes sort of bigger than the organization, bigger than the board. You've seen it in the for-profit world. We've all certainly seen it in nonprofits. But again, I think it's about people fundamentally understanding and living the appropriate role, right? So the appropriate role for a board is to set a vision, hire and fire the CEO, hold the leadership team accountable, right? That's sort of your base responsibilities as a board member. And just because your CEO is amazing doesn't relieve you of that responsibility, right? So you have to be understanding what's happening in the organization. For me, I've always, when I was a CEO, I encouraged my senior staff to have relationships with board members because I wanted them to be comfortable to sort of ask, how is Craig doing, right? What is that? So I think you can't, just because you have a great CEO, if you're a board member, doesn't relieve you of your responsibility, which is to hold them accountable, to make sure they're doing the right thing. Because there are some CEOs that are great. It's sort of like the Godfather kind of wartime consigliere concept, right? There are some CEOs that are great when everything is great. Right. They might not be so great right now. Right. So you're right. You have to sort of understand who you have, what their talents are, and monitor it.
Yep.
We all see people that are sort of cracking apart under this.
So here's a great question.
You gotta be attentive.
Here's a great question I'm going to answer. Is it better to lay off high-performing employees or retain them during this period? I mean, I have a very, very, very strong view of this one, that you retain your talent. because first of all, I personally believe, I told you, I'm optimistic and positive. I think this is going to be more of a V-shaped recovery, or, than anything else. So, it's something we couldn't control. I think we have the opportunity to bounce back. So, if you have we all know how challenging it is to acquire and find amazing talent in our industry. So if you have people who are really performing well, there are other actions you can take, like salary reductions and furloughs and things of that nature, that are not permanent departures and terminations. Terminating might be better, in terms of unemployment benefits. I wouldn't, I would say sure, but that also doesn't sit well probably with most higher performing employees. So on the margin, my recommendation would be, certainly at Orr Group, and I'll just lead by example here, we have no plans to make any changes in our high performing employees. So I feel really strongly about that. Shabby, why don't you comment on how long are your daily meetings? Because we really get into this. So explain.
We have all staff meetings that are 15 to 30 minutes. And then we have regular meetings, either, client work related or touch bases or whatever, that are up to an hour. Given the physicality of needing, like sort of the physical nature of needing to sit in front of the computer and not being able to sort of move around from office to conference room to office to conference room, realizing that there is that, we're trying very hard not to have meetings last longer than an hour, so that we can sort of allow people quote unquote wellness breaks and let them sort of get up, stretch their legs, do what they need to move around, get some water, etc. It is so critical right at this moment to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. And even though we need to be constantly connected and constantly, talking to one another and seeing each other and making sure that we're not allowing any of our folks to be isolated in this time, especially for those of our staff that are living alone, that we do that in a way that also preserves their physical health and allows them some room to move around.
And then Shabby, final question for you, I think, is how do you manage, sort of the work-life balance? People at home, there's more time, for things like in our meeting yesterday of all staff at 5 p.m.,
Yep.
you had everyone go around and say, what do you really enjoy about being at home? And man, we got some great stories from, all of our staff about being with family and, no more commute, so how much time have I saved with no more commute? Really great stuff like that. But, many of us who are managing, a large number of staff are also worried all the time, are we getting the productivity? Are we getting the job done? There is more time, in theory. So how do we manage that, and what's your advice there?
Yeah, I think it's all about leading with, comes from the top. I think it's all about leading with compassion and flexibility and empathy. I mean, this is something that we hold really dear in terms of our values, but I think that speaks for everyone. I mean, we see that at all the organizations that we're partnering with or working with right now. Certainly, I think leading with empathy and leading with sort of an understanding that like what just happened with you, right? Like, this is the product of being at home. Family is going to be around. There's going to be, if you have family around, it's going to happen, and it's natural to be drawn in multiple different directions. And I would say, be as understanding and patient and flexible with that as you can as the leader of the organization. And when we get back to work, whatever that looks like, whatever the new normal is going to be, when all of this sort of subsides, I think we should carry that through. And it might take shape differently, right? It might not mean that everyone shows up to the 8 a.m. call in their pajamas, but it might mean that we have a little bit more flexibility in terms of teleworking or working from home, or if you need to have personal time to go take care of a loved one or whatever, or if we just allow more time during the day and be more flexible with what quote unquote work hours actually are, right? If you get to my emails at 6 a.m. and I get to them at 8 a.m., that's fine, right? If that works best for you so that you can go do your drop off in the morning, then that's what you need to do. And I think that as much as we can come at it with compassion and flexibility, and empathy, I think the better.
So I'm watching the clock. So I want to move to fundraising now. We can come back to some of these issues if you wish, but let's get into some fundraising because, in the context of us being at a moment, I really feel strongly that we need to start thinking differently about what we're willing to do and not willing to do in outwardly facing situations. So one quick thing, if you look back, to the last couple of crises, whether, 9/11 and 2008 period, it came back, fundraising came back. at varying degrees of speed, but it came back. And if you looked at the aggregate numbers of giving, they really didn't get hit too hard. You know, there's sort of a freezing initially, I think, like there is now, but there's certainly opportunity this time around for it to come out very quickly. I will make one note that we definitely saw, you know, post 2008 to 10 period, planned giving became a very, very important part of the fundraising ask, and the ability that people had to give large, to give, you know, the campaign size kind of gifts or major gifts. So the blended ask has become critical. And if you're not making blended asks in your campaigns, we should talk, because this is, I believe, I would predict this is going to be, once again, it has stayed really important in the last, you know, decade. It's going to continue to have a very, you know, significant focus, I would say. And there's a lot of technique around that. But let's go to probably one of the most popular questions that we all are confronted with right now. Last week we said, don't probably go out and make big fundraising asks just now unless it's specifically related to COVID, but do communicate. So, but now here we are a week later and the world is changing constantly. So Craig, are we ready to ask for money yet, or should we still be socializing and communicating only?
Yeah, I mean, I yes is the short answer, but sort of the more sort of complicated answer. I mean, first and foremost, like, your mission matters, right? Unless you woke up and decided that your mission is no longer relevant, you can't just stay on the sidelines. Right? We're now in a period where this isn't normal, but this is going to be how we live for a while. So we need to start acting accordingly. Now, donors are ready, right? So I mean, we've seen in our work, we've seen 7-figure gifts, 6-figure gifts, 5-figure gifts. You know, gifts of all levels are being made, not just to specific COVID issues, right? Like, so, like, we're seeing gifts of things that are not, you know, immediate sort of relief for people suffering or for medical, you know, sort of things related to the crisis. We are seeing gifts, though, only to organizations that people care deeply about, right? No one is waking up and saying, I'm going to drop a 6-figure gift on something I've never heard of before and never spoke to before, but they are continuing to care about and give to the things that they believe in. You know, annual giving, that's back. I think we're at a point where you hit the right tone. That's sort of smaller level giving. You can ask for it. You can put it out there. It should be in your mass communications. Major donors, it's coming back. And again, I think a week ago, I definitely would have tread more cautiously than I do today. But I think as long as you do sort of 4 things, you can be asking people for money, right? So I think first, which we've talked about last week, and we've all been talking about, you have to communicate empathetically, genuinely, authentically, as a human. I care. How are you? Because hopefully, because you really do care. But you know, that needs to be where you start. Then you need to communicate about, you know, what's going on with your organization, right? How has your organization been impacted? How is your organization evolving and providing services in a new way or the same way? Whatever you're doing, you need to communicate what's happening with that. Then you need to ask permission to ask, right? Like, I don't think we're in an environment where typically when people meet with people like us, fundraisers, they know we're going to ask. That's not their assumption right now. So you need to sort of have that permission. And then you can ask. Now, all 4 of those things can happen in one conversation. You could have 6 conversations in step 1. You know, you could get stuck anywhere along the way. But I think you have to kind of go through a process with people. But it is possible to get to the point where you can make solicitations 100%. And we're seeing it.
Yeah, yesterday on our internal call, we didn't ask the question, but people started saying, I'm really amazed and delighted that my organization got a $25,000 donation. And a hospital that we're working with on a campaign that's been, you know, slowed down, if not halted for the moment, but received a $250,000 gift for a COVID-related activity. And then another one in Chicago of our clients got a $2 million gift. So, you know, I guess the point is the money's still there, the heart is still there. You know, whether it's the perfect time to start asking yet or not, I think Craig is right. It depends on what the activity is and what the tactics are. Asking for an event right now that isn't going to happen is very challenging, but still necessary to do, for example. What do you think, though, Craig? What's your general advice? Because we're all day long giving advice about capital campaigns, you know, whether you're in the middle of one or whether you're just thinking of starting one, which most organizations are at some phase of that thinking. What's your advice there?
So again, and you're coming at the end of this sort of economic period where people were getting ambitious, right? Giving was up, the economy was solid, so organizations were setting their ambitions higher. Generally, that then results in some sort of campaign. So first and foremost, like don't stop. Like this doesn't mean that you have to sort of end your campaign. This doesn't mean you have to pause your campaign. This means your timeline probably changes, your activity maybe less so. But I would say, like, there's a reason that campaigns are typically multi-year. I know a lot of people have thought that was just to provide employment for firms like ours over longer periods of time. But the reason you do them over a number of years is you catch different economic cycles, right? So you're factoring in at some point in this period, things aren't going to be great. Maybe it's at the start, maybe it's at the end, maybe it's at the middle. There are times that it's better than not, probably like sometime in the first quarter is probably better than sometime in the last quarter, but it all depends on you and your campaign. But like, so that's why you do the multi-year. I would say there's specific constituencies to think about, right? So people that are in pledges already, like they've made a pledge, communicate. If you can afford to be flexible in sort of when they pay and maybe they start to backload their gifts a little bit, 100% communicate that you're okay with that. People that are considering pledges, like you asked a month ago, then all this happened and sort of it's hanging out there that they're supposed to give an answer. I think it's important to communicate with them too, like I'm flexible on the timing, maybe I recognize things have changed. I would not go towards like a change in the ask amount. Let them bring that up if they have to. But like, let's assume if I ask for $1 million, that's still the ask on the table. Just be clear, like you don't have to decide today. The first payment can be later. The payments don't have to be equal. Those kind of things. Just sort of recognizing the world around you and being flexible like that. Prospects, right? So that people that you were going to ask, I think that's the same stuff we just talked about. Have those sort of 4 stages of communication before you get to an ask.
Craig,
and I think a lot about people. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Let me add on campaigns. I've been giving, a lot of organizations that are just, either very early on or just thinking about structuring a campaign. And the question is, what should I do now? It is a very good time to do the preliminary, casework and feasibility and building a campaign plan, for a campaign that you're not sure when you would actually push the go button on or not. But this is time when people have more time to think, more time to be interviewed, more volunteer time likely, and whether donors, have the ability to give at the same level right this second or not is, can be that decision and that ask can be delayed a bit. But it's an excellent time to start thinking about that. And I agree with everything you just said. Let's go back to, there are a couple of really good questions here. What does the permission to ask look like? And how do you actually ask permission to ask? Because I like that part of your progression of how do you get back into fundraising as well.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure. I've done that before. I stole the idea recently from somebody else. I was on another webinar. Like
it's a good idea. You can steal it. It's okay.
I know it's a good idea. Right, exactly. But I think it's that explicitly. It'd be like we have, at the moment we have needs in our organization. It's important that we continue to fundraise. I'd like you to consider a gift, but I don't want to make a presumption that you're in a position to do so right now. And so I think it has to be that explicit. And I think back, like one of the successful big asks that I made, not in this environment, but like for a variety of reasons, I ended up calling the donor the day before the CEO and I went to ask. And I point blank told her what we were going to ask for. And it was the best solicitation ever. And she said, I appreciated you telling, like kind of preparing me so I wasn't off guard. So it's a little bit of taking that sort of experience and applying it to this. It's sort of telegraphing exactly what you want to do and see if they're comfortable with it. I mean, we were talking with somebody the other day about a large gift that we need to solicit. And we said, let's ask in the virtual conversation, would you be okay if I sent you a proposal to consider a gift, right? So again, it can be very, very simple, very straightforward.
There's a question here about how would you advise managing up for leadership that isn't meeting this moment with regards to pivoting towards a new normal and sort of a newly evolving fundraising set of priorities. I think that's an easy answer because you want to right now bring your leadership together and talk about everything that's happened with the organization. Where are the stress points? How are they feeling? Have the conversation and then let them participate with you in terms of figuring out what's next. When do we actually start making asks? What are the top priority asks? Obviously, if you're a healthcare organization you can link your asks, directly to the current situation, the virus, in some way. And we see organizations doing this all the time, all these special funds that are being put together and such. But beyond that, I mean, the core mission of the organization can be linked and should be linked, to what we just went through. And this is not just the virus, it's the economic impact on people. I mean, it's going to be broad, it's going to be wide. A lot of people need help. So we have a very good case from that point of view. So I think you manage up by involvement and by communication and by asking advice. People love to give advice. We all get to sit here on this webinar and give advice. We don't have to listen. It's really good. But it's a great tactic in fundraise to listen to opinions and actually take it very seriously and then apply it to your next moves, and that you're going to gain involvement and ownership in ways that you're probably not aware, unless you're doing it already, then Let's go to virtual events. We have dealt with dozens of situations because we manage these very large galas and a lot of, and a small number of conferences, but more, a lot of cultivation events and that are linked to campaigns and such. So this whole virtual event thing is clearly in play. I have views, but Craig, what say you on that topic? What do they look like? What's the best advice, et cetera?
Yeah, I don't think we found the one answer yet, right? I think people are taking different things. I'm seeing people sort of converted more to a day of giving, where they're driving people to a platform that has a lot of the elements of the gala. I see people trying to do it this way, where it's like becomes this very like almost like a webinar. I think the biggest mistake would be to try and do the exact same thing, right? To sort of say like, well, we were going to have a luncheon at 12 noon on April 8th. And we should run through that exact same program and assume that everyone will eat rubber chicken by themselves in their, like I think you have to recognize it's going to be different, and do it differently, right? So yeah, but I don't have the one answer. I've seen a lot of things I like, and it's also kind of early days. I don't know what works yet, right? Like it's everybody's sort of doing this as they go. So I don't know. I know it's a lot cheaper. I know everybody that's doing it is saying like, well, geez, whatever I'm doing, my net's going to be a lot more if I can kind of keep the gross anywhere, sort of reasonable.
I think 3 weeks ago, the answer was, well, you can cancel the event, or you could just push it back, later into the spring or into the fall, or you can do a non-event event. And I think now it's become more of let's just kill the event for the spring, at least. If we could do it in the fall, let's think about that. But the whole virtual event thing is going to be, I think overdone a little bit. It's surely trying to hang on to donors who have already committed to events that would have happened, say in April, May, June, is a really smart thing. And we're involved in a lot of that. And what we're finding, 98% of the time, donations that are committed or close to commitment for an event are going to stay with you. The question though is, most of the work, as we all know, for an event from April 1st, for a June 1st event happens between now and June 1st. So the question is, will people give to a virtual event or a non-event event? It's not that exciting, to attend a gala online, right? I mean, unless you have really cool entertainment or something, a real attraction.
It's barely exciting to attend the gala in person. So, yeah.
How many rubber? Yeah. Well, at least you don't have to eat the rubber chicken, so that's good. But you could have your own chicken at home, and you could have a beer and such. But you know what I mean. Yeah, you save money on that. But the question is fundraising, because we all do these for fundraising. And the question is, are you going to be able to showcase the organization, in the ways that we can at galas? And the answer is probably limited, because people are just not going to stay online with you too long. So it's a tough situation because we all get our unrestricted dollars this way. And the fall calendar is, oh my gosh. Trying to find a venue for these events that are being pushed back, pretty interesting and challenging and difficult. So one idea, though, that we're working with a couple organizations is, if you want to push back to the fall and you typically do 1,000-person gala and it's really tough or impossible to find the venue, downscale it to a 200-person VIP only event, where you bring your table buyers into a room, and you're getting a lot of what you would have gotten. You're missing, the other 9 people at the table, but, you can get a lot of the objectives can be accomplished, I think, by thinking about it that way. And the value then is you'll find plenty of venues, that can accommodate 200 people or 100 people. Craig, what other ideas do you have? Because we're getting a ton of questions.
Yeah, and it's a popular question, particularly in a lot of our markets, because like they're so dependent on special events. So one, you got to be creative, right? So all the things you're talking about, they're all the ideas you need to explore. But the sort of trite answer too is that we've all known that we needed to be less reliant on events, right? Like, so this is the moment in which it's going to force us to act differently, right? I mean, the people that are best positioned right now, and I hate to say this because like I ignored plenty of this advice in my career, but the people that are best positioned are the people that built strong relationships with their donors over a long period of time, did the right things, thanked them, did everything right. They're fine because the donors love them. They stay with them. It wasn't dependent on a chicken dinner or who you honored or anything like that, And the people that sort of did all the things they knew that they should not do, but kept doing them anyway, they're sort of stuck now because so this is the moment of kind of, I guess it's Cuomo keeps talking about like there's these reset moments or we're going to reset life, right? Like this is an opportunity to reset your fundraising too in a lot of ways, right? Like if you can do the right things now, people will remember. Same thing with leaders, right? If you do the right things now, it'll be remembered for a longer period of time because everyone will remember what happened now. So you're going to come out the other side of this with stronger relationships with your donors if you do the right things, with stronger, staffs if you lead the right way. So like it's I don't know. There's no good answer on events, unfortunately. There's a lot of okay answers.
There's a question about, when do we make our call as to whether we're going to do a fall event or not, move forward or not with a fall event. Personal view is we just signed up a client today for a fall event. I mean, and part of it was because I advised them, you should do your event in the fall. The world might not be perfect then, and it might be the same as it is now. I hope not. But, you can always make those adjustments. But meanwhile, the fundraising element's critical. You will not succeed if you don't make this decision soon because you need leadership and you need all the elements of an event to make it work. So go ahead, dare to be great and, pin the date, go for it. And everyone was going to understand if the world remains, in the pit through the fall, that it's going to be the same sympathetic situation then as it is now in terms of moving the event once again or whatever decision you'd have to make. So I would go ahead. I would get on with our lives right now as to the fall. It remains to be seen what we're going to do, for the remainder of the spring in terms of normal life or not. But in the fall, I think we should assume it's going to be normal for the moment, and then live the caution on the way there. Okay, virtual events. We talked a bit about that. Shabby, how do we get you into the fundraising conversation? What's the impact on personnel, on staffing? In all this uncertainty and, fundraisers sort of being not dormant at the moment. It shouldn't be dormant as a fundraiser right now, but I think a lot of organizations feel that way, that, well, there's nothing I can do. I can't make asks and such. So, but that's not true, I want to say, but go ahead. What say you?
I agree. Yeah, no, that's not true at all. I mean, I would fall back on the age-old adage of never let a crisis go to waste. And I know that sounds sort of bizarre, but what that means is that in a crisis, everything is heightened, right? Stress, anxiety, fear, all of these things. But what's also heightened is focus and creativity and understanding. And so, there's greater intentionality in every meeting, in every call, in every piece of outreach, in every touch point with a donor. I think this is sort of prime leadership time, right? Take the helm, provide clear direction, communicate regularly, let compassion and empathy guide you, and you'll come out of this with your team stronger because of it. And does that mean that some things are going to need to change? Yes. Does that mean that tough decisions are going to need to happen? Yes, absolutely, right? We would never say otherwise. Even if all things were under normal circumstances, tough decisions need to be made and things need to change just generally, because that's how life is. But I think in times like this, leaders are made here in moments like this. And so I would lean heavily on that thinking. So never let a crisis go to waste.
There's a good question about the fall and the inevitability of talking about elections and what does that do to our events. This is about the most unusual period we've ever seen in terms of, what's happening in the election and what's not. I mean, kind of happily, we've gone away from not talking about the election every day. That's the only good thing I can think about this crisis. But
it's been a great break.
Yeah, right. The fall will come upon us, and there will be an election, and there will be conventions, and all of that stuff. So, I mean, I always find, we are an event firm. We've been doing events for 30 years, all kinds of events. And sure, there's not a fundraising competition. I don't find. I think political fundraising is completely different than fundraising for a nonprofit organization. So I don't worry about that part of it. You worry about the attention part and whether people are going to attend, and where's the focus and so forth. But unless your event is attracting a ton of media, which most events aren't, it's for the group that comes into the room. I would go ahead and I would not worry about elections, because you need, it's something that the organization needs. It's unrestricted funding. It's very important to bring your groups together to rally around a cause, or to celebrate, a success or a cure, or whatever your issue is. So I think it's vitally important. We all say, oh my gosh, I don't want to do another event. It's too much work, it's too much money. It is. All that's true. But why do we do them? We do them because we have to congregate. We have to bring people together. Of course, in this environment, we can't. But I think my personal view is there's going to be an enormous pent up demand to get together, after Labor Day, because we haven't seen each other. We haven't networked like we're accustomed to doing and all that stuff. So that's just a personal view. But I think that's another thing I wanted to go off on, because we're getting close on time here, is the planned giving thing. How do you structure a planned gift, or how do you talk about it, interject planned giving into a conversation? And I want to tell you this, that I have focused on planned giving intensely over the last several years. And I know that people of my age, for sure, and I think at a lot of ages, particularly those, in New York and Washington and other places, and Silicon Valley, San Francisco and others, where a lot of money's been made, they're thinking about estate planning. They're thinking about protecting their families from taxes. There's a lot of conversation. It's an enormous industry. And the tax code treats charitable contributions very, very favorably. It's probably one of the best ways you can go about using the tax code to not pay taxes and pay them to charities instead. So it's an enormous body of work. If you're not familiar with it, you really should hire the expertise or partner with a firm that knows what they're talking about, because it's so important. So yes, you should integrate into a conversation by simply starting by saying, how have you done with estate planning? And let them talk. Boy, we're really wrestling with that. We've got this issue, that issue, we're using any number of techniques. Great, fantastic. Would you, have you considered charity as part of that equation? And yeah, we have, and we're looking at that closely, and we've gotten our whole family involved, and all the stuff which is really relevant for what we're talking about here. Getting the family involved in the favorite charity is a wonderful thing, and it can be very powerful, and it can lead to very, very significant giving. And once you make a planned gift, it's typical that the giving becomes greater and greater, because the passion is there and the commitment is there. So, my colleagues, do we see other questions that are urgent? Because we have 2 minutes left. Question on strategy. Go ahead. You guys have? No?
No, I see a couple like real tangible things I could answer quick. Like, can you follow up on an appeal you sent out just before this? Yes, definitely. I think the big takeaway that we're saying to you is like, you got to go forward, right? Like, it's going to be different. You got to have the right tone. Don't pretend like nothing changed, but your mission's important. I saw one even like, well, what if we're a youth service organization?
Right.
Unless you feel your mission got less important, you need to be out there.
That's a great one. I love that. Unless you feel your mission has become less important. You don't feel your mission has become less important. Youth will be impacted by this problem we're experiencing right now. All the kids are not in school. They're at home. Parents are in many cases without jobs. The home care person isn't available to help with the tasks. There's a lot of issues that I can think of for every youth charity that you can sort of maybe change the message a bit and some of the focus, but that doesn't mean that you're not important. I think this is where entrepreneurs are good, and the nonprofit sector, because we alter and we adjust and we deal with the moment that confronts us. And I think we can all do that. So public health officials are estimating 12 to 18 months before a vaccine is available. If the CDC, we're we have a lot of expertise, but we don't have expertise in this area. So how do you see event planning? Okay, that's another event planning question. We just don't know. I don't know. I don't have a magic wand in that case. So again, my advice would be go ahead and plan your fall events and winter events, and then make adjustments if, the worst happens, that this pandemic continues. That's what I would do. That's what I am doing. That's what I'm advising, and I'm helping with organizations do. Okay, it's 1:00. Thank you all very much. We are probably coming back to you again next week on a different topic. So thanks very much. Have a good day and be safe and healthy. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.